Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Rena.
and welcome to Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode titled Introduction: Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah, what movie are we doing this week?
This week we will be talking about Evita. Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie contains depictions of violence, including people being beaten in the streets, an older adult male in bed with a 15-year-old girl who is played by a 35-year-old actress, and arguably positive portrayals of fascist sympathizers who IRL harbored Nazis.
Ugh. And Rena, can you please give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
And Rena, do we have any sources that we used for this episode? I read the internet. That's what I read.
Evita, First Lady, a biography of Eva Peron by John Barnes, and a bunch of articles we Googled on the internet.
Excellent.
Can you please tell us a little bit about Eva Peron and Evita?
Certainly. From our friends at Wikipedia, Maria Eva Duarte de Peron, better known as just Eva Peron or by the nickname Evita, was an Argentine politician, activist, actress, and philanthropist who served as First Lady of Argentina from June 1946 until her death in July of 1952 as the wife of Argentine President Juan Peron. And Evita is a 1996 American musical historical film based on the 1976 concept album of the same name produced by Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, which also inspired the 1978 Broadway musical. The film depicts the life of Eva Peron, detailing her beginnings, rise to fame, political career, and death at the age of 33. Directed by Alan Parker, Evita stars Madonna as Eva, Jonathan Pryce as Eva's husband Juan Peron, and Antonio Banderas as Che, and everyman who acts as the film's narrator. The film earned $141 million worldwide against a $55 million budget. I am coming into the conversation today with a little bit of backstory and trivia. First, I wanted to mention that Madonna changed costumes 85 times, more than Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra. And because of this, Madonna was an entry in Guinness World Record that year, in 1996. Impressive, but not an all-time record. Donald Brooks designed a 125-piece wardrobe for Julie Andrews for the 1968 musical Star. This is a film that spent a lot of time in development hell. Beginning in 1981, Robert Stigwood, the producer behind Grease and Saturday Night Fever, actually tried to get Alan Parker, who ultimately did direct this movie, on board, but he had just done Fame. So he passed on it, not wanting to be pigeonholed. And then Stigwood brought in our old pal Ken Russell as a potential director who would have probably transformed this into a weird juvenile sex fetish piece, which is what he did all the time. They screen tested Liza Minnelli for the role, and Russell left the project when they were not going to let him go forward with having Liza Minnelli play Eva Peron. My suspicion is that there was a lot of cocaine involved here because they started working on this film without approval from Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Like, they got kind of far down the road, Ken Russell and Stigwood and Liza Minnelli, before the plug was pulled. Madonna actually met initially with Robert Stigwood for the role in 1986. And she wanted Francis Ford Coppola to direct it, which would have been something. Re-entering the chat is our old pal Oliver Stone, who was attached to direct this for a very long time. Initially with Madonna still on board, but then she asked for a complete rewrite of the score. Andrew Lloyd Webber was like, that's cool, you're out. And Meryl Streep was attached for a long time with Oliver Stone, and then that fell through. And he decided to bail and make The Doors. And then he finally left the project forever to make Nixon and an abandoned Manuel Noriega biopic that never happened, thank God. Alan Parker came back to the project. And it seemed like he never wanted anyone else but Madonna for this role. And I have some interesting feelings about that, and we'll get to it. Also, Alan Parker, I just wanted to mention too, is such an interesting director choice because he is kind of noted for not having a specific style. He stated at one point in his career that his goal was to work on as many different kinds of films as he could. One thing that you can credit Alan Parker with as a filmmaker is that he's an actor's director. He consistently directed actors to their best work throughout his career. He did Bugsy Malone and then followed that by Midnight Express, which just kind of demonstrates the bananas level of versatility that this man had as a director, and then went to fame and then made The Wall. He made Mississippi Burning. He made The Commitments. He made this, Angel Heart, Angela's Ashes. So really just all over the map, and pretty consistently excellent direction. And he stopped making movies in 2003, and he passed in 2020. And I was reflecting on how sad it is that Alan Parker never got to be a part of peak TV, because I think he would have been an absolutely incredible asset to some of the peak television that we've seen, because his work is so situated in this adult contemporary drama category.
Tell us a little bit about your feelings towards Andrew Lloyd Webber, because he writes a lot of earworms, and he's someone whose work I enjoyed somewhat when I was around 12. I did hate Cats, which we all went to see when I was 5, and my entire family, all of us hated it because it had no plot.
I have mixed feelings about Andrew Lloyd Webber, as I think many people do. I think my reductive view of him throughout a lot of my life was that he was super lame, because I was a Sondheim theater snob as a kid. And I think having Cats and then essentially following it with Phantom, there was other work in between there, but having those two things one after the other felt particularly soulless in 1980s. I do think there's something worth noting that he started off the 70s working with Tim Rice on Jesus Christ Superstar and finished the decade with Evita, and bookending the decade with two very structurally similar musicals about the rise and fall of Messiah figures. And I would also add too that his best work is with Tim Rice. This might be my favorite show of his. It's certainly one of his best in terms of how tight it is and how structurally disciplined it is, and also the music is really gorgeous.
A lot of Lloyd Webber's music walks a fine line between memorably tuneful and earworm that he often crosses over, and I appreciate Rice's lyrics quite a bit.
Yeah, he's a really good foil for him. And this particular show and score and movie, it's at its best when it is focusing on the cynicism and the political intrigue. I felt like the strongest moments of this were those that were focused on that. I think Lloyd Webber is clearly like an absurdly talented individual, and when I was a kid, I was very dismissive of it. And now I appreciate it more.
It's part of the 1980s Broadway mega musical. One thing that I noted was that Calm Wilkinson, who sings the role of Che on the concept album, was the original Jean Valjean on the Les Mis album that I listened to every day when I was 12.
Yeah, we've got Colm Wilkinson in our blood, don't we? Us youth of a certain age, raised on Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll never forget the time that we went to see Miss Saigon as my birthday present, and a really rude squeegee man made me cry and ruined the day.
Oh, that's awful. I also would say too that in terms of the recordings of this, I think the concept album is my absolute favorite. The actress who played Ava on that, Julie Covington, has just like such a sick rock and roll voice, but also crazy range.
I discovered in researching this movie that I find Eva Peron less interesting than the story of what happened to her corpse after she died, which is a grisly, macabre tale, and I think that some Halloween, I definitely want to go as the kidnapped corpse of Eva Peron. Her corpse has had both a biopic, the film Ava Doesn't Sleep, and a prestige drama produced by Salma Hayek, the series Santa Evita, based on a novel by the same name.
That's wild. The original Broadway cast, the one with Mandy Patinkin and Patti LuPone, the original staging closed with Che coming out and saying her corpse was missing for 20 years or something like that. That's how they ended the show back in 78. And with that, movie opens in a movie theater in 1952, where the screening is interrupted by the theater owner coming in and announcing that Eva Peron has passed. And we cut to Antonio Banderas as Che, who looks just really annoyed. He's an everyman throughout this film. They've played with different iterations of what Che is and who he is. In the Broadway production that I mentioned in 1978, Mandy Patinkin played him as Che Guevara, but they've mostly just stuck with him being Che, a everyman.
I find it more likable with Che as everyman because I don't like the romanticism around Che Guevara. To me, he's just one more dude bro who thinks he has a right to take my stuff, and I don't see anything worth romanticizing about him.
I mean, it's got like a real messy cocaine inspired kind of idea to it of just, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we contrasted Eva Peron with Che Guevara? Awesome. No one said no. But it doesn't sequentially make a whole lot of sense. So I am glad that got killed.
I did learn while researching this that the closest there was in real life to any interaction between Eva Peron and Che Guevara was that he wrote her a sarcastic letter asking her for a free bicycle.
We've all been there. I hate to accuse him of being unoriginal because I hate to offend any dude bros, but yeah. So we're kind of cutting back and forth in this opening of seeing the funeral procession of Ava's father, who we find out she was part of his second family, his illegitimate child, along with some of her other siblings, and she is not able to mourn her father. And the movie goes back and forth between those two things and does some, Godfather 2 kind of color contrasting, so you can see the change of time, which I appreciated.
I appreciated that Evita handles passage of time really well. I never had any trouble knowing where we were or when we were, even like subtle little shifts of the 30s turning into the 40s via change of hairstyle and the sense of time passing both seasonally and by year. It was masterfully done. And they're at this funeral, and I found myself thinking, if only Evita's father's wife had been a complete saint, the history of Argentina, South America even, could have been completely different. Because the thing that made me truly detest her comes slightly later when she says, "Screw the middle class." And I thought, if only his wife had been a complete saint and allowed the mistress and her children into the funeral, perhaps little Eva would have grown up to be in favor of freedom of the press, liberal democracy, measured, thoughtful, good, clean government with well-planned bills and change, done in a painlessly premeditated, incremental, yet fair manner. If only. But instead, his first wife did what honestly I think any woman would do to her husband's whore. So Eva grew up to hate the middle class, which was a shame, because I believe that a thriving middle class is key to a healthy society.
Oh, indeed. And also, I mean, to counter your argument about well thought out bills, there's nothing quite as sexy as throwing things at poor people in order to create joy. Like we've seen that from our previous president, and we see it in here, throwing money or paper towels or food at them delights them, and it makes for great copy.
I don't think the Puerto Ricans liked having paper towels thrown at them.
If you ask our former president whether or not they liked having paper towels thrown at them, he will disagree with that assessment.
Since when is he Puerto Rican?
But he said they were having a great time.
I believe him about as much as I believe that the Perons did not harbor Nazis.
Which is to say, you totally believe him. I'm joking. Oh my gosh. We're also seeing Ava's state funeral, and it is a huge bananas big deal. We see Juan Peron in mourning. You see all of the money on the screen here. This is such good direction. All the time you are seeing framing, you are seeing sets, and you are getting a sense of place. You're seeing the grandeur of the Casa Rosada, and you're seeing the grandeur of the state buildings, and you're seeing the streets, and you get a real feel for the setting in which all of this is taking place and the scope of the tragedy to the people of Argentina and the attendance at this event. Like we go into an empty bar, and Antonio Banderas starts singing the opening song, "Oh, What a Circus." Alan Parker makes the choice to have him sing right into the camera, and I am here for that, because you know what? This is a musical. This is not a movie trying to hide that it is a musical. He is narrating the film, and you might as well go all the way for it, and I thought this was such a great choice.
You like the choice for a musical to be brave and honest about saying that it is a musical. I'm going to take this moment to objectify baby Antonio Banderas all over the floor. He is such a dreamy stud muffin in this movie.
He's so gorgeous in this movie. His singing voice is amazing. This is the part he was born to play. Kind of don't believe that they could have made the movie without Antonio Banderas. And he is right there in it, and he's just pitch perfect. And something that I really like about this too, which is praise for the musical, is like the lyrics are immediately setting up the divide between who Eva Peron represented herself to be and what she actually was. And we get right away that this memory of her is completely false. And then we cut back to meet a very young Eva Peron, and she is hooking up with this cheesy tango singer, Magaldi. And Madonna is playing Eva Peron. Um, as I mentioned, it seems like there was no one else that they were looking at by the time they got to 1995 to make this movie.
Anna is playing Eva Peron at 15, the age that she in this leaves the little town of Hunan with Macaldi at, although there's no real evidence that he was who she took off with. He died in the late 30s, well before he could have run into her again in 1944. Donna does not look 15. Also, throughout the film, she is wearing these brown contact lenses that make her eyes look like beady black pools of nothing, just like these weird little doll-like things rolling in her head, like in a cartoon where they're showing someone being really stoned where their pupils are the size of the iris. I found it incredibly distracting. And I know that Madonna has light bluish eyes and Eva Peron had brown ones, but the tech on colored contact lenses has evolved only marginally. This was actually something that is so detrimental to actors' ability to emote that it was the first big divergence that Game of Thrones made from canon, where in the books, Targaryens all have violet eyes, and it's a huge deal, but they found that the actors' performances were so hampered by wearing like hard-colored contact lenses that they had to just let the actors have their real eye color. And Madonna is not that great of an actress, I think. I think she is not as good of an actress as Angelina Jolie, to bring up the episode from 2 weeks ago, and certainly not as good as you felt Queen Latifah was in Betsy. So it hurts her acting. I would say if you want an example of an actor doing an incredible performance while wearing colored lenses that cover nearly the entire pupil, check out David Tennant in Good Omens, where he's wearing these snake eye things to play a demon, and he does such an incredible job performing despite them that you wonder how any actor could have trouble with colored contact lenses. But I think this is an important digression because those brown contact lenses are a distraction throughout the film, and I would like to keep this entire bit in because it was a big deal to me.
This is so interesting because I did not notice it.
What?
I didn't notice it. I thought that Madonna looked beautiful in this movie. I didn't notice the eyes.
Oh, I'm not saying she didn't look beautiful, but it was like her eyes just had these black dots in them, and the coloring that you're born with between your eyes and your skin naturally works for you. I found the brown contact lenses incredibly distracting as well as disturbing.
I didn't notice it. I mean, and that's okay. I'm just kind of amazed that I didn't notice it. But
it's fine, Sarah. I still love you.
I will 100% not cut your feelings about this. They are real and they are valid, and I will not invalidate them. It was interesting to rewatch this sequence because I remember originally, like, I did think it was super baller that she was gonna make this guy take her to Buenos Aires. The town is fully in support of her being taken away by him. And I had a note here where I was like, remember when people used to get in trouble for raping girls? Those were the days. And he gets kind of run out of town on a rail with his new girlfriend. I also noted here too, one of the things that Andrew Lloyd Webber does exceptionally well is write show within show music. There's a song in the musical Aspects of Love that he wrote called Parlez-vous français that is just the cheesiest 1950s song you would hear. on a French radio show. And I feel like On This Night of a Thousand Stars is also in that category where it's just a pitch perfect, cheesy song that this guy would sing everywhere forever and ever. We go right into the song Buenos Aires because he does take her. And this is one of those songs throughout this. I kept kind of clocking whenever the key of songs was changed, or when musical lines were changed to accommodate Madonna's voice. And this is one of the more glaring ones. This song is slowed down a bit and it's in a slightly lower key to make this a bit more forgiving on Madonna's voice.
A lot of how Madonna got big wasn't because she was the best singer. It was because she knew how to promote herself. I suppose Patti LuPone did not look 15 either. A lot of the material for this was based on a book called The Woman with the Whip that was very anti-Eva Peron, that came out the same year Eva Peron died. And there have been more sympathetic biographies written since, but a lot of this depends on how you feel about various forms of populism and how wealth is redistributed, whether you're a Peron apologist or an anti-Peron. The concept album and the productions of this are coming out as Britain is on the road to Thatcher, so there's all of that going on in the background. And they make what, for me, was one of the big mistakes of this, which was that when it's discovered that Macaldi has a wife and children, they have Madonna sing Another Suitcase in Another Hall, which in the original production is sung by Peron's teenaged mistress later on when Evita kicks her out. And this suffers from too much Madonna. There is no female voice that you hear in this at all but Madonna, and it makes it monotonous. You need a variety of female voices, and there were so many younger female singers coming up at the time who could have given it that variety that would make me not get sick of hearing only Madonna's voice. Give the song to Madonna because no other woman is allowed to shine or get anywhere close in this picture. That's a big mistake. The closest that Madonna ever came to showcasing younger talent was when she gave Britney the kiss of death.
So true. I had problems with it too, just from the viewpoint of it doesn't make sense to kind of what the concept album and the score is for her to sing it, and for Evita's characterization. I was of the mindset it's a lovely song, but it's one of those things where you see how something like that works on stage wouldn't translate into a movie. So cut the song, skip over it, and have her go right into her sort of her rise to, manipulating and using men. And it just gives the character a weird unearned vulnerability, and I don't care for it.
Sorry. I would have said just do it the way it is in the musical. Give another younger female singer a blockbuster cameo that throws Madonna into relief so that there's a bit of novelty when she pops back on. Since the character is clearly not saintly anyway, if she's going to be mean to this girl in the scene, just leave it as it was for all the reasons that I've said. It's too beautiful to cut, I think.
Character-wise, it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't track with kind of the presentation of Evita in this. And I just as soon cut it all together, or have the other character sing it. But I think my instinct almost would have been like, with the way that this film came together and presented things, like, cut the song. Every time we start to explore Eva Peron's inner life, I lose interest. The things that I am most interested in watching this film for are the politics and the way those things are shot and those musical numbers are put together. And every time we grind to a halt to listen to Eva sing a ballad, I'm like, can we move it along here? Can we go back to Jonathan Pryce? Can we go back to Che? She's not a great actress. I'm not that interested in her life. I'm much more interested in all of the other things going on around her.
Well, the "oh, but it's sad when a love affair dies" cycle that you see coming up, where you see her first, she has the casting couch, then there's the photographer, then there's the guy, and you see like the next 5 or so years of her life happening as she cycles through various lovers who can give her something and discards them. I think this might have been my favorite part of the whole film. It was just delightfully tart and bitter, but it had this gorgeous music behind it. Banderas is just the right amount of sarcastic, the way he does that obscene gesture every time which means get out. This was gorgeously staged, and like the costume designer does everything just right in showing how what she's wearing is getting a little bit more sumptuous. And shortly after the end of this, she's blonde, and the blonde was never supposed to look natural. They didn't have natural looking methods of bleaching back then. Eva Peron was imitating Hollywood stars. So her hair was supposed to be that solid gold, and I found myself thinking her hair must have been fried, and she must have still been bleaching while she was dying of cervical cancer that spread to the rest of her, because on the corpse photos, it is blonde to the roots.
Dedication to the craft of blondness.
Yeah, we see why Madonna related.
Yeah. Then we go into what I think is, after that, one of the other best songs from the score, which is "The Lady's Got Potential," which was on the original concept recording, did not make the original Broadway show, but did make subsequent revivals of it. And Banderas sings the heck out of this song. And we see in a really efficient way how Juan Peron started to rise to power, how he was kind of sneaking around without anyone really noticing him, and how he played the game. And it's a really great sequence because we see how he climbs the ladder, and it's done really efficiently. And it's really exciting when Jonathan Pryce arrives in this movie because he is such a great actor. He's tight, his carriage is perfect. He embodies this character not only as Juan Peron, but also as an actor playing Juan Peron in a musical.
I never could quite bring myself to sympathize, but I could bring myself to like feel his being in love with this woman, even though in real life his wife died of cancer, his first wife, and then Eva died of cancer, and it's thought that it was the kind of cervical cancer that you get from your husband giving you an STD. But Pryce does an amazing job in this, and I guess the role that I think of him the most in was as the High Sparrow on Game of Thrones, where I just loved to hate that, like, sanctimonious, smug man, and he played that so well, and he plays this role really well here, too.
I'm sorry, I'm back at him giving both of his wives cancer because of his disgusting, dirty penis. Oh my God. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Okay. Anyway, Peron decides to throw a fundraiser because there's a giant earthquake in Argentina, and Eva Peron is recruited to perform at this, and so is Magaldi, and they have a little run-in. Which, as you pointed out, wouldn't have happened because he was dead. And we catch just a tiny bit of a song that replaced "The Lady's Got Potential" in the original Broadway production, which is the song "The Art of the Possible," which was really, really well staged on Broadway. They show a lot of chairs moving around because you see how like incredibly twisty-turny and unstable Argentinian politics are. As I mentioned to you, Rena, I spent about a minute looking at the Wikipedia page and I had to peace out because my brain was going to explode trying to understand um, Argentinian politics of the 20th century. um, so I, you catch a tiny bit of this song, and then they meet and they have an instant connection. They have Madonna and Jonathan Pryce also have really good chemistry, and he's one of those actors who makes everyone he's working with even better.
Yeah, Peron takes advantage of this earthquake to further his career, and they meet and they hook up, and she kicks out the teenage mistress who should have had the song. Yeah, and I would love to think about up-and-coming female singers of the 90s who are vocally different from Madonna, who could have improved this by just having some variety of female voices in this. Like, no woman but Madonna was allowed to be pretty. No woman but Madonna was allowed to have a real solo or a memorable dress. And it's monotonous and it hurts the movie.
You see right away that if Eva Peron is not very popular with some of the leadership. There's this whole sequence here where you're seeing how the military responded to her being around. Peron realizes that he needs to make some maneuvers again, and he gets thrown into jail for reasons. Some of the politics here are not very clear, and it really doesn't matter. Like, you're kind of like, oh, okay, she's not popular and he's now not popular, and they're threatening him and he's going to get put in jail, and then we're going to try and get him out of jail, and then we're going to form a new government, and it's fine.
Yeah, you see officers on horses and you see tanks, and it's never clear what's going on because there's this sense of, oh, one group of corrupt people are replacing another group of corrupt people because different reasons. The big showstopper is coming up, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. And let me just say, with our new catchphrase, Madonna is Oscar baiting all over the set. And I would like to add the slogan, no nomination, it's Oscar-bation. It does not count as Oscar-bation if they actually got nominated for an Academy Award, which she did not.
To the great despair of many that year, it was her and Courtney Love didn't get nominated for People versus Larry Flint, and it was a lot like this year when Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie didn't get nominated for Barbie. There was a lot of rending of garments and wringing of hands, and except it felt even sillier in retrospect, especially watching back both of these movies. But nevertheless, she did not get an Oscar nomination. And also, I was given the moment to reflect on, like, what the hell is this song Don't Cry for Me Argentina about? That song makes no sense. She goes out on the balcony and she's telling everyone she never left them, and she's telling them about her wild days and her mad existence, and all these people are out there saying, you're supposed to be giving us a workers' revolution and giving me wealth, and you're out here talking about fortune and fame. What is happening? But they're all cheering for her. I realized I have no idea what the hell this song is about, and that's that. Rena, any thoughts?
What I said before, somewhere in here there was the song A New Argentina, which I guess was what they were going for, but it's all just one big cycle of one corrupt group in and another corrupt group out, and some of them have better self-promotion than others.
Indeed. And Pryce is so good in this sequence. He does something that I'm guessing the real Juan Peron did, but I don't do research. Which is he keeps doing this thing where he takes off his coat, his like suit jacket, and like showing his shirt sleeves and motioning with his arms, and everyone is really excited when he does that. And it's just like a great gesture that I would guess comes from a place of research that is not a thing I do.
Well, I loved the part where all the people in the army are singing about how they hate Peron's latest flame, and for some reason they're doing this while they're fencing and while they're in the shower, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Those sequences are really great because they're unapologetically musical. And they're fun, and they're humorous and arch, and there's that sense of that sort of biting satire that's at the core of all this, that occasionally gets swirled up in sentimentality, especially when they're trying to get Madonna her Academy Award by doing all of these ballads.
Yeah, and when they show the people voting around this time in the film, you'll notice there are only men in the voting lines because women in Argentina could not vote until 1947. And their first use of the vote was backing Peron because Eva was such a great spokesperson. In France, I think it was also after the war. Yeah. Things sucked for a bunch of millennia.
They did. They still kind of do. So she's out there waving her arms around on the balcony and everyone's cheering, and she leaves, and one of the generals says to her right away, "Statesmanship is more than entertaining peasants." And I'm all, damn son, that is a warning. And it is, but they didn't really seem to get past that. As I mentioned, they liked throwing things at poor people.
Speaking of throwing things at poor people, we're about to go into a bunch of haute couture Dior references, but what I meant when I said speaking of throwing things at poor people was to refer to tastelessness, which is Madonna's wardrobe in this comes off much more tasteful than a lot of things the real Eva Peron wore. I remember reading an article at the time where they said that, no, she had a lot of hallmarks of the tacky nouveau riche, where she wanted to throw on all the diamonds just because she had them while she was wearing a sundress.
I like this sequence, the song Rainbow High and then the Rainbow Tour, because it does really show that contrast of what they were campaigning for and saying that they believed in, and the obscene wealth that she demonstrated, in terms of, the way that she dressed and the way that she insisted on presenting herself and the way that the government presented her, and contrasting that with the fact that, World War II had just ended and things were bad in most places except America.
Yes, so they show she's a big success in Spain, in Italy. People associate her with Mussolini. In France, she starts to seem a bit tired, and she doesn't go to England. So the thing about England was George VI, who I love, did not want to meet with her. Good for him.
Did George VI catch wind of the fact that Argentina was a safe haven for Nazis?
I'm not sure, but I know that he didn't like his brother because his brother liked Nazis. Had some attempts at apologism, like they thought, well, at least the Nazis weren't communists, but their kind of redistributionism, it just doesn't make any sense. There's so many layers of horseshoes bending into each other four-dimensionally that I can't manage it. Thank you for making our politics up here in North America look simple by comparison, and sorry if I've been culturally insensitive.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to live in the opinion of the camps kind of cancel out any good ideas that they had.
And it gets very complicated. Like, I read something that I couldn't quite get what was going on, where when Peron came back in the 70s, the right-wing Peronistas shot at the left-wing Peronistas on his arrival, and I couldn't figure out, was he involved? Did he plan this? What the hell is going on here?
Thank God America isn't so stupid that we would welcome back a leader who was forced out of office in disgrace. Anyway, so we go on to Eva wants to do something good, and she launches her charitable foundation, and you really see how toothless but captivating her efforts were to try and make things better for Argentinians, or excuse me, to make things better for Argentines. You see, it was great PR, but it was also nonsense. Just that it was really just throwing paper towels at poor people for the cameras.
When you said Argentines versus Argentinians, what that reminds me of is in Annie, in the song where Miss Hannigan is trying to seduce Daddy Warbucks, and he corrects her pronunciations, where she says something about, well, something, the Argentine, and he says Argentine. I don't think either of us knows what to say, and let's forgive each other. And again, there's contrasting opinions depending on what your politics are, on whether you think the Eva Peron Foundation did good work, because people will point out hospitals, help for the poor people. And then the other side will say she did a lot of things that were like queen for a day things for poor women who then went back to their lives and could have actually used some more consistent, less glamorous bread and butter stuff that would have in a non-thrilling way made life better overall, but oh well.
Like, are you making the point, like, instead of, Oprah giving you a car, Oprah should fund universal health care? Is it that kind of thing?
More like, instead of Oprah giving you a weekend at the spa, Oprah should fund making sure that your family gets vegetables to eat for the next few years.
I hate it here. Oh. Ava now wants to be vice president, and Peron's advisors are all hells no. This is a great moment for Jonathan Pryce in this role, where he gives them all the business on saying, we keep our jobs because she makes everybody so happy. And I also started to think too, like, what is the end game when you're Eva Peron and you're 26 and you have become the first lady of Argentina, and you see what happens to people who lead this country? They don't stay leaders forever. Bad things happen once you get to the top. And I guess it becomes a game of, how do I hang on and survive?
She's getting weaker around this time, like her health has something to do with why she can't be vice president, because she had cervical cancer that was spreading. She fought it for like 2 years, and there are stories about this, that she may have been the first person in Argentina to receive chemotherapy or radiation. She had a hysterectomy where they flew a doctor down from New York Presbyterian, I believe it was, and I heard two stories about this that conflicted. One of them was that she said Viva Peron while she was under anesthesia, but another one was they flew this doctor in and he had no idea who he was operating on, which would negate the other story, because if you're operating on a very blonde woman that you've been magically flown in to operate on in Argentina, and she says Viva Peron, it's probably Eva Peron.
I don't think you would have the emotional wherewithal to be like, Viva Peron in the middle of your hysterectomy.
But I don't know, maybe she was just so accustomed to saying Viva Peron that it was what would be coming through her self-conscious, because she was so accustomed to delivering propaganda. So she may have had a lobotomy to deal with the pain from the cancer, because when they x-rayed her head from the corpse, there were marks and you can see an indentation, and the thought was that she was in so much agony that it was to decrease her emotional reaction to the pain, and that what actually happened was that was when she stopped eating, and it was a few months before she died. Also, the possibility that Peron never told her she had cancer, because husbands were allowed to do that back then, not tell your wife what they're suffering from.
It's a real like buzzkill to find out you're dying.
By the time that she died, she weighed 79 pounds, and her last public appearance was at Peron's final swearing in, where she swore she was going to go to it. So they just shot her full of opioids. And in these photos, she's absolutely haggard looking, and she's wearing this floor-length fur coat where you can see from her face how wasted away she is, but underneath it, there was this plaster and wire framework to hold her up because she couldn't stand on her own.
This conversation is grim. What a horrible end. Ugh. It's so gross and awful and tragic.
Yeah, also, I think she knew what was about to happen to her body, because since red nails and lips equals whore, as she was dying, she asked her manicurist to take off her red nail polish and put clear on, just so that she'd make a more saintly-looking corpse.
Awful.
But back to the musical, where there's no lobotomy sequence here.
Ugh. Would have been a hell of a musical number, though. So, things are going real bad. She is getting very, very sick. And we have this sequence where she goes in the hospital, and this is another amazing musical number from this show, which is Che and Eva's Waltz, where you see sort of the way, like, her cynicism channeled her forward, and his idealism as a human is problematic. And this is a great musical number. And then the movie kind of shuts down for about 25 minutes because there's, I want to say, 4 songs dedicated to Eva Peron dying in this musical. And they just went ahead and added another one. Which is the original song, You Must Love Me. It's a lovely song. Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote it for the movie. He won an Academy Award for it. It's well performed, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, we've got her dying. We've got it covered here in the existing material. It extends this out longer than it needs to be, in my opinion.
So I think that You Must Love Me is a pretty mediocre song, and it's an example of middle-aged white people winning Academy Awards for things that should go to younger, more relevant music that the Academy isn't going to vote for. It's another example of what happened when Thoroughly Modern Millie won in the year when, I believe, A Hard Day's Night was eligible. There was better music on film soundtracks that year than this song. I think the final moment of this that was like good was when she's in the wheelchair and Peron just like picks her up and carries her up the stairs. which was just a beautiful moment of a husband knowing he's about to lose his wife, and almost made me sympathetic, even though I know that he's playing someone who gave refuge to Nazis, and I thoroughly detested the Eva character with zero sympathy from the point way back at the beginning when she said, "Screw the middle class."
Well, and also he's carrying her up the stairs and he's like, "Did my dick do this?" I guess it did.
Okay, that's a rabbit hole I didn't bother with. I did not know if they knew back then that cervical cancer was caused by a certain STD.
Fair enough. But now that I know it, and now that I know that he probably did that, I'm so like squicked out that I'm never gonna not think about that.
I'm sure there'll be moments of your life where you aren't thinking about Juan Peron giving his wife cancer.
I strongly disagree. This is the rest of my life now. This is my new Jonestown. Um anyway, so we go through some more musical numbers where she's dying. She sings one "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" again. And again, this song continues to befuddle me with its lyrics. And then she has a moment with Peron where she's singing about, like, this is what I chose for myself. It's the best acting that Madonna does in this movie, because she's very emotional, and Jonathan Pryce is very emotional, and she dies, and it's very sad in a way that movies are sad when people die, when you're not examining too hard some of the complexities of Eva Peron as a first lady, and Peron as a leader and a Nazi sympathizer, maybe. And this is the movie's end, and that's the story of Evita. Do you have any other content to add to this?
Yes. So, at the end, something they leave out, but Che does mention that her body went on the lam for close on 2 decades. So, what happened was a Dr. Ara was brought in to do to her what was done with Lenin and Stalin. So he got a hold of the body almost immediately after she died and replaced the blood with like glycerin and alcohol and some kind of waxy layer over the skin, and it announced within a day that her body was now completely and totally incorruptible. So she had her viewing, and then he continued to work on the body for 3 more years, where he was just in a room at CGT headquarters, shuffling liquids in and out, and various gases and waxes, and it allegedly now smelled like lavender. And if anyone had thought to burn it at one point, it would have burned up a building from the amount of flammable stuff it sounds like he used. But eventually Peron has run out of the country, and they still have this body there. So there was one guy who was in charge of keeping it for a few years who became obsessed with it and shot and killed his pregnant wife while he was in a room with Eva Peron's body because he thought she was an intruder coming to take the body away. Eventually, they shipped it off to Europe under an assumed name, where she was buried for umpteen years in a grave that was labeled as belonging to a woman named Maria Maggi. Eventually, her body was given back to Peron as an apology. So they brought in the original doctor who said, yeah, she's a little worse for the wear, but the work I did 20 years ago is still holding up. Like, she'd been shoved into a coffin that was a little too small, pushed everything back around together, and he said, no, this work is holding up. And Peron is still in exile for a while, so the corpse lives on their dining room table with him and his new wife. So he was 48 when he married Eva, who was half his age. The new wife is also of a similar age to Eva when she was married to him. And the corpse was a little dirty, so his wife cleaned it off with like water and cotton and brushed the hair. And then he would have her sleep next to the corpse in the hopes that she could absorb some of Eva's magic and charisma. And eventually he comes back to Argentina where it's put on display, and then his much less politically talented third wife, Isabel, does get Eva's new old goal of becoming vice president. Peron dies, she becomes president. He's in a mausoleum with her for a little while where she is on view, he is not, and then Isabel Peron is also run out, and Eva Peron was finally buried in a vault under 20 plus feet of concrete at Recoleta Cemetery in Buenos Aires, where people still visit. None of this gets a song and dance, of course.
That's disgusting. All of it. Gross. What? I did not expect to feel so grossed out by so many things in this episode. Oh, the cervical cancer, the corpse on the dining room table, having to sleep next to the corpse.
I'm not sure if he had her sleep the whole night with it, but he had her like lay down next to it to see if she could like by osmosis get some of the magic from it. And like there are some photos where it's just like that very like pale waxy color, but then there are ones from when they brought it back in the 70s where someone's working on it. It looks like someone put heavy bronzer over it, but it also looks different from inside the glass top casket. The doctor who did it was fond of things like he would carry embalmed peasants' heads around in his bag to take out and show to people, like as a way of saying, look, isn't this lifelike? What a great embalmer I am.
I mean, I guess in the age before we had digital portfolios, how else would you show your work?
Yeah.
You know? I could talk about this corpse forever.
It's a crazy story, isn't it?
It's just so weird. It's so weird to bring a corpse everywhere with you.
And make no mistake, the Peronistas wanted that corpse back. It was a thing with them. Like, where's Evita? They wanted that body brought back to look upon and adore.
Okay. Any choice dialogue?
Not really. No, actually.
I like the book of this show quite a bit. And everything, but there's nothing that I'm like, oh, we need to quote that right this second. The internet's available to you. You can listen to it. So, with that,
okay.
Should we go into scoring? So for outward appearances, I gave this an 8. I thought that the costumes and the makeup and hair looked really, really good and accurate and of the time. And also, as you noted, showed movement through time as well. So felt pretty good about it.
Gave it a 7. I thought that while the hair and makeup was all very well done and the passing of the eras, I had to deduct for the Uncanny Valley brown contact lenses that distracted me throughout the entire film.
Acting and casting. I gave it an 8. Everyone was as good as they could possibly be because Ellen Parker was directing it. And I am very iffy on Madonna's casting. As I said, she's as good as she could be. But I can't help but notice how much more excited I was about things that weren't from her POV. So, 8.
Ditto. I gave it an 8 because of too much Madonna, and Madonna was allowed to Oscar bait repeatedly in a way that hurt the film. Someone needed to put a lid on her, and nobody would have had the guts to for what they were spending.
Passage of Time. I gave this a 7. I thought this was really mostly very clear, occasionally a little slippery. The last chunk of the movie is very episodic in terms of showing who Eva Peron was rather than showing things sequentially, but that's also a structure of the musical. And I also thought the age casting was really good. The baby Madonna looked like not only baby Madonna, but also, aged really well into Eva Peron.
For Passage of Time, I gave it a 9. She was only out there in the world's eye for about 6 or 7 years. So if it seemed like that time was short, it's because it was, and where they had to show the 1930s turning into the 40s and then the early 50s, they were very good in showing how one year looks slightly different from the next. And I always knew when we were.
Costuming, I gave it a 9. I thought that these costumes were really gorgeous replicas of existing fashions. I know that there were some accuracy issues in terms of how she dressed. But I loved looking at these costumes, and I felt like you saw the money on the screen when it came to the costumes.
Not to surprise you, Sarah, because remember when I said that I would never give a 10 for costuming for anything set in the past 100 years? I gave this a 10 for costuming because there were 80 wardrobe changes. They went through time, and it's not just that there was everything, it's that there was so much of it. Officers had those spiffy uniforms that looked right. And like those double-breasted men's suits, the shape is kind of awkward, but they got that right. It was all the right amount of worn in or brand new that it needed to look. And it was all fantastic. So sometimes I change my mind. And I did here because I was just kind of stunned.
You have every right to change your mind. Quality of the script, I gave it a 7. And those dings were specifically for that Another Suitcase debacle and the You Must Love Me business. Those things just felt shoehorned in and inappropriate for the script as it was. In terms of, like there's a pretty set structure.
I gave it an 8 because Tim Rice is just the right kind of, just the right amount of bitter. And whatever went wrong is Madonna's fault.
That's fair. Accuracy, I gave it a 5. These things all generally seem to have happened. There was some sequential stuff that didn't quite fit. Just because they only have so much time and you are a musical.
Yeah. 5 also primarily sins of omission. The American Ballet Theater production of Romeo and Juliet has a beautiful bit with a dancing corpse, but I don't really want to see that anyway. So 5.
Oh, it would have been fun to have a corpse dancing around in this. Storytelling. Was it cliched, interesting, inventive? I gave it an 8. It's a rock opera, which is often, but not always, an interesting format. And I think the choices that they made to make a musical come alive on screen really worked.
I also gave an 8 for storytelling. You're right.
Production value, I gave it a 9. All that money was on the screen. As you pointed out, there were tons of people dressed in period appropriate and accurate and lovingly detailed costumes. The sets were beautifully designed. This movie didn't feel small.
I gave it a 10. There was everything. There was a lot of it. There were lots of people. There were trained horses. There was some dangerous-looking, well-choreographed action between people and horses in crowd scenes. There was stuff blowing up that looked real in a way that made you think, oh, wow, they blew that up? It was impressive. It was a feast for the eyes. 10.
For production and direction decision-making, I gave it a 7. A lot of it I liked. I hate the song shifts, and I am going to remain iffy on the casting of Madonna.
For production, direction, decision-making, I gave it a 6 because someone needed to put a lid on Madonna. This movie needed less Madonna, and I would have appreciated her more. Like, it needed a big star who was known as a singer. So, in some ways, it's a role she was born to play, even if her voice is not as good as other people they could have used. But it needed less of her.
And do we care? I gave it a 4. I guess I care, kind of. As I said, I was much more interested in the political machinations and seeing how all of that worked than I was in Evita herself. And that's a heck of a story about that corpse that is just money being left on that table. And I kind of am more interested in the corpse story than I am in Eva Peron.
If you're interested in the story of the corpse, there is a book called Santa Evita, which was made into, I think, a 7 or 8 part prestige drama series by Salma Hayek that looks very good. And also kind of like an artsy, not necessarily lovable biopic of the corpse called, I think, Eva Non Duerme, or Eva Doesn't Sleep, where you see 2 men beat each other bloody over the corpse. Do we care? I gave it a 2 because I despised the lead character from the minute she said screw the middle class until the end. She said screw the middle class, and I was like, no, lady, screw you. And I didn't care after that. I cared about the Argentine people and watching what was happening to them. I did not care about her. I did not care about her Nazi-shielding husband. I was occasionally affected by the performances while remembering, I don't care about you.
Oh, good. We need to add up our scores.
I already added mine up. It came to 7.3.
I had a 7.2. Where does that put us?
Puts us at 7.25, which means this movie does not qualify for second opinion, which I think is fair. We loved a lot of things about it. Why would we want to read bad reviews of it?
One review I did read, though, I was doing some research where someone said it's like a glossy 2-hour music video. Yeah, it is. It is, because it's a musical. It's based on a rock musical. I don't know what you came here for. It stars one of the most universally recognized pop stars of the 20th century. What were you hoping to get? But, you know, these people and their opinions, Rena. Is there anything else you would recommend before we close out? I would say, just as some good counter programming, there's a really overlooked movie starring Ben Kingsley and Oscar Isaac called Operation Finale. It's a movie about the Mossad agents who were charged with going to Argentina to collect Adolf Eichmann.
The book Santa Evita is very good. That's the one that Salma Hayek made into a prestige series.
I would also, as I mentioned, my favorite recording of Evita is the original concept album that was recorded in 1976 by, as I mentioned, Julie Covington played Eva Peron, and Colm Wilkinson, future Jean Valjean, played Che, and is incredible on it. To me, it is the best recording of Evita. So if you're gonna go seek out a copy of it, that's the one to get.
I know that we've been ragging on Madonna, but if you want to hear Madonna doing what makes her special, go listen to the Immaculate Collection album of her greatest hits as of about 35 years ago, not the soundtrack to Evita, the movie.
Also, she is really, really good singing the music of Stephen Sondheim and Dick Tracy. I will also give her that. She's incredible in that movie. And she's not bad in this. In a perfect world, we have a stronger actress at the center of this film. But she's good in this. It's just not what it could have been.
I think she's good at this. She has star power. What it needed was less of her and more variety. That's our show, folks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear all of this helps.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about Beckett, starring Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, which I'm looking forward to because I've always been fascinated by the early Plantagenets. The 12th century is a big favorite for research with me.
You just said a bunch of stuff that is in English that I don't have any idea about. So this is going to be a real ride for me as well.
I guess I've been kind of bored with the 20th century, so I'm excited to be throwing myself into the world of Beckett, who was brutally murdered at Canterbury Cathedral, which I visited last year.
I am excited to venture into the world of Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole's astonishingly chaotic alcohol abuse. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. And good night, Rena.
Good night, Sarah.